Hey, hello everybody. Welcome to this week's live stream. I'm joined by Mod Markos and Mod Kieren for what is going to be the final Leeds live stream of the year. Not the last live stream though, because we do have the Golden Names coming out tomorrow, which will be fun. First things first, let's do some introductions. I'll start with you, Markos. How are you doing today? What have you been up to this week? Anything interesting you can share?
Mostly just preparing for Christmas, I think. So I'm gonna make sure I've actually bought some presents and things like that, and not doing a mad panic on Christmas Eve.
Yeah, I'd like to thank Amazon for helping with all of my purchases this year, as per, leaving it till the week before. This is a standard. What about yourself, Kieran? How have you been? What have you been up to this week?
I'm good. I mean, the same boat, right? Amazon's the lifesaver. You got Prime. It's always going to come in a reasonable time frame. All these other websites are like, gonna order by like October to get it by Christmas. So, you know what it's like. I've got everything ordered now for Christmas. Wrapping is the thing I'm rubbish at. I mean, Amazon's very useful at that too. But everybody knows what the Amazon packaging looks like, so you don't want to look cheap. If you know what I mean. You don't want to give a bad impression when you hand over your gift and it's in that clear Amazon gift bag that everybody recognizes.
Well, why not?
But the other question I've got is it Markos or Markos?
Well, that's the eternal question, Kieran. So it can be either. I'm fine with it.
It's whatever you want it to be. That's what we just heard. All right, I'll go with that. I leave all my wrapping, by the way, until Christmas Eve. No joke, it's just like a tradition. I can't wrap anything before. If I do, it's bad luck. I've decided. It's just my really terrible planning, but I always end up doing it at Christmas Eve.
Yeah.
All right, let's run over some announcements, and then we've got some pretty big questions to be asked. So I don't want to take up too much time with my rambles. So first things first, ! Game update. It's Christmas in Gillinor. This year's Christmas event is based in Falalalalalalalalador. Thanks for putting that in the script. I really appreciate it. Definitely go check it out. This week's game update is the last of this year, and what a way to end the year. ! Game update for all the information you need on there. As well as that, today we also released the December Gillinor Gazette. It is now out. ! Gazette for a link to that. We've got a roadmap for the first half of 2022, which we'll actually be discussing in a bit more detail today, as well as some more information on frequent topics, on the things that you care about. So take a read, let us know your feedback, ! Gazette for that one. We'd also like to thank everyone who took the time to vote in the Golden Gnomes so far, and to remind you that the polls close tonight at midnight GMT. The event starts tomorrow right here on our Twitch channel at 5 PM GMT, ! Golden Gnomes for all of that info. And then last but not least, ! Next trailer. Next, the 5th General is releasing on January the 5th. Want something more to stew on? Check out this awesome trailer in the meantime.
The prophecy foretold of an ancient warrior, locked in a prison deep beneath Trollheim. A force so powerful, so malevolent, 4 opposing armies united to contain its evil. They called her the 5th General. It's said she hoards artifacts of tremendous power, and that an enchanted seal is all that separates the brave from her wrath. You don't believe the story's true, do you?
Hi!
That is pretty hype.
The first time I saw that trailer, I was so pumped for it straight away. It's amazing. It's exciting to see Next finally coming to old school. I'm really keen to see it.
Yeah, you're a massive shill for Next, though, aren't you, Kieran? I know it's one of your favorite pieces of content. We spoke about it multiple times on the stream. So, are you ready? Do you have a team in mind to go and tackle the 5th General when she appears on the 5th?
I think my group Iron Man group can barely do God Wars, so let alone the 5th General. So eventually, well, I might jump onto the main and do some unlaunch, of course.
Okay. You're definitely going to be popping onto your main account. I know it already. Don't try and kid yourself. You'll be there. You'll be slaying next. You'll probably get the first drop as well, like the first unique out of the team, I reckon, just because it has to be that way. Okay, all right. Well, that was a really awesome trailer. I'm really happy with the way that trailers are kind of like shaping up. I love the kind of like new old style, and it also is very fitting with what a lot of our content creators are using at the moment as well too. Most recently, we've settled some final video of Swampletics, and I think Hootie Tootie is a big fan of using the same technique. Put a video out recently actually that I just retweeted of what the final showdown should have been like. Highly recommend checking it out if you haven't already. Right, let's get into the thick of the stream. So we have the roadmap on screen at the moment. This is for the first half, at least, of 2022. There are some things out of there that have been omitted or just kind of snipped off just before the text appears. Fully intentional, because we want to talk about those later on in the year. But I guess the first question really is, what considerations went into creating this roadmap? And when creating the roadmap, did you take into account all of the player feedback from the past year?
Yeah, so we tried to take a kind of a balanced approach, I guess is the best way to describe it. And we wanted to learn from some of the things that have happened this year. And like the first thing we wanted to prioritize was making sure there was a steady stream of releases, so that there was things consistently coming out for the players into the main game, and that they were well catering for like the bulk of the community, so people always felt there were regular things coming along that they'd like to play. When we look back at this year, there's been some like really cool releases, but there's also been obviously kind of like dry periods when there's not been much coming out. And what's kind of happened is we had like some very, very large updates like Group Iron Man and clans and so on, and those involved a lot of people and they were like extremely complex. And that meant that we ended up obviously having to put of more resource on it, which meant that we ended up with less updates being worked on, but with lots of people on the smaller number of updates. So what we're trying to go towards is something more standardized, where we have a more steady stream of updates, which are kind of like still meaningful and making and being like, you know, good, valuable updates to players, but we're able to keep releasing them on a much more regular basis than before. And the other thing we've also been looking about is making sure that we're tackling all the different areas as much as possible. So we're looking at looking at areas of the community and making sure there's more regular quests, for example, or we've got regular improvements to skilling systems, or PVM content and those kind of things. And obviously with PvP as well, we realised that's an area of the game that's been kind of under service for a period of time. And we're trying to do our best to kind of like start building content for that, replacing some content as well, and making sure that we're tackling some of the longer standing issues in that area.
Okay, great, thank you. There's a lot of detail in the Gazette that is touched upon as well. So if parts of Markos's answer weren't really addressing what you were hoping for there, definitely go check out the December Gazette. As I say, there's a whole feature on the roadmap and the way that the teams have been split out, and we'll cover it a little bit more as well going into this. So the next question from me at least is, can we expect reasonable consistency on updates next year then? I mean, obviously the end of this year for many players has been really disappointing in terms of content, especially if you're not playing Group Iron Man. Now we know some big things are coming, but we've had things get delayed that people were looking forward to this year. And I think it's fair to say one could easily imagine more delays happening next year with how it's been thus far. Anything you can say to that at all?
Yeah. Do you want me to take that one, Kieren?
I'm happy to take it. I mean, it's really touching on just what you just said. Like, a lot of the planning for this roadmap has been exactly that, to create more consistency, address the fact that we had too many dry gaps in 2021, too many big things. So we intentionally have decided to split the sort of development team into more smaller teams, so we can have a little bit more in flight at once, more smaller releases, medium-sized releases. So just what you see on screen. So stuff like a skilling update or a small quest, or looking at things like even community event support, where we can get some things out more quickly and also emphasize on sort of that monthly beats, the big monthly beats. So, you know, as much as we release weekly, we're kind of separating out, like, you know, the general quality of life stuff, but also the kind of headline releases, the noteworthy things that we might put marketing behind and things like that. Make sure that significant things are frequently coming out. Kind of the next layer on that is not just significant things, but balancing it across different player cohorts, right? You as players know you have the PVMers, there's people who love quests, there's people who love PvP. We can't just give content to only one of those categories. We've kind of got to give content in the right sort of balance across all those players and make sure that we are adding stuff for everybody. An MMO is more than the sum of its parts, so it's really important to touch on all of these things. So when we planned the roadmap out, we were kind of like categorizing, like based on each month, like which sort of players are going to be happy with this month and so on, and make sure there's a good balance to it. So one thing I can say right now, I mean, it doesn't show you the full year, right? But the PvP Arena Wilderness Boss Rework is essentially a PvP team. That's all their projects are going to be themed on PvP, and so we constantly have work going into that. And so if things come up in the community that's like, oh my god, this is an urgent need, that team's going to be probably well placed to assess its roadmap, think about what projects they can do to address players' feedback. So that's the kind of stuff we want to get to, and you can imagine that across different types of content too, not just PvP. It's kind of where we would like to build towards. But yeah, I think this roadmap goes it's a lot stronger in terms of solving the problems that this year you've all been pointing out to us.
Great, thank you for that, Kieren. The next question is one that I'll probably end up taking myself, but it is, when can we expect the Tombs of a Massacre rewards blog? I know a lot of players expected it to come this month. They haven't heard about it for a while. The short answer is next year. We'll be talking about the Tombs of a Massacre rewards, at least. But before then, as early as next week, we are hoping to be able to put out a blog that at least includes poll questions for the quest that will accompany Tombs of a Massacre, as well as Tombs of a Massacre itself as the raid, minus the rewards, and then also the Land of the Goblins to be included within there. So it'll be kind of like the last big blog of the year, looking to just poll those last bits of content that you've all spoke about, and then in the new year, we'll be able to focus on the actual rewards. Reality is, as much as it may suck to hear, there just hasn't been enough time to be able to focus on getting that out with everything else that's been happening with the team shifts and with resource rejigging and whatnot, as well as quite a lot in the background that's been worked on. So yeah, next week for the quest, for the raid, as well as Land of the Goblins, and then January. It's currently scheduled for the mid-January, so not a huge amount to wait. It's around about a month or so from now. So yeah, apologies, but that's when you can hear about the Tombs of Massacre rewards next. The next question is, the reason you gave for Leagues 3 being delayed was to give players who were competing in Group Ironman more time to enjoy the game mode. However, for the past 4 weeks, players have not had too much content to be playing in the meantime. Leagues 3 is now going to be released very close to next, which kind of causes the very same problem where players are going to be forced to choose which content they can play. Do you think, essentially, delaying Leagues 3 was the correct decision? And can you explain more about your decision for the delay?
Yeah, so we still believe it was the correct decision. Like with Group Ironman, we saw like essentially a massive influx of players kind of into the game and to that mode, and we realized that it wouldn't necessarily be fair to kind of pull them out of that mode so soon after going into it by releasing League so close to it. And also just forcing people to make that decision, maybe if they wanted to play one or the other, plus the main game, we just felt like it wasn't really the correct thing to do at the time. And it was also something that was being brought up in advance by the community as well, that we'd been cognizant of. We recognise in particular, obviously, the fact that we announced it so close to the release wasn't great, and obviously we'd like to avoid having to do that again, and we recognise that it must have been like really frustrating for a lot of people who are greatly looking forward to Leagues. With regard to next, we see that content as phased, it's not different. It's obviously in the main game. It's not a separate game mode in the same way as Group Ironman is. And also, it's we expect a lot of players to try it out, but it's not necessarily quite as long form as Group Ironman, in that you can obviously kind of spend months and months playing that. And the other thing that we find interesting would be that obviously with Next coming out before, that means Next will actually also be in the league as well. So it gives players the chance to try Next out in a different way, in a potentially different meta and so on.
Cool. I think that last point is the one I personally am most excited for, at least, is being able to try Next in League, because I doubt I'm going to be able to do it in main game, but with the extra power of the leagues, it's going to be a really fun way to see how different people can do it. I'm looking forward to seeing if people can actually push it to make some efficient solos whilst in the league at least. But hopefully that's
really
something that
to watch.
Yeah, it will be. But hopefully that kind of like quashes some of the concerns that players had, especially. You will be able to fight next within league. And yeah, you'll have a few weeks before it even comes out in the league at least to play it on your main accounts, maybe generate some wealth, maybe get lucky on an Iron Man and get some loot before you take a mini break, before you face against the 5th General once more with insane power-ups. So, okay, so the next question is, what progress have you made on account security since you were last on stream discussing it in the summer? To be more specific, two-factor authentication on a player's account can still be bypassed through Steam. We still can't use capital cases in passwords, and we're still not able to change our login emails.
Yeah, so firstly for the Steam, like 2FA, so we have looked at that. There's a few different ways we could address it, and we're trying to establish what the best method of doing that actually is. It kind of depends on people's perspectives to a degree. So we are looking at that and trying to see what a sensible solution is. For account security, work has been going on since the summer on that. And that's going to essentially cover a range of improvements to the account system as a whole, which will include the types of things referenced above. What we'd like to do is a dedicated live stream to tackle that. So there's obviously quite a lot of questions from the community around it. I think we probably need to go into a reasonable bit of detail to cover that off. So we'd like to do something in the new year where we talk about that in more detail generally.
Okay, great. I look forward to that. I think many others will as well. It's been a long-standing topic within the community. So look forward to a dedicated live stream in the near future, at least, talking all things account security. Until then, though, there has been a lack of smaller polls this year. When is poll 76? And do you have plans to introduce more polls next year to address periods where there is less content? I'll kick this one off. Poll 76, it's currently being refined. Essentially, we have a heap of backlog jobs that we'd like to prioritize and put forward to the polls that have been suggested with previous polls or just from general, player feedback and from the streams as well. And those kind of jobs where we said, yep, let's just do it. So we want to be able to go through all of those. And then in January, feels like a lot of things are coming in January now. I realise it's going to be a busy month for us all, but that's when we'll start asking for new suggestions with the poll blog to then follow. And then, Kieren, maybe if you want to touch on the roadmap side of things as a whole.
Yeah, so again, it's kind of going back to the roadmap conversation. Not enough stuff, often enough. And the same applies to the quality of life polls. You know, it's been a long time waiting for poll 76, and we could have gotten more out. Now, why didn't it? I mean, a couple of things really. The operators, the dev team who does the quality of life polls, they've been a little understaffed. They've had to deal with some technical challenges, like having to basically rewrite how the login scripts work. But, you know, excuses aside, the team needs more resource. It needs to be prioritized properly. And in 2022, that will be the case. So we should see more frequent quality of life polls throughout next year. Passing on some of the PvP work onto a proper PvP team as well frees them up to focus on that kind of stuff.
Okay, great. Thank you. I think to expand on that slightly a little bit, you'll see that, I mean, pretty much in the roadmap, there is a whole row that is just entirely dedicated to quality of life and weekly updates. And that is where we'll be fitting in, the polls. So they've not been listed as specific dates because we've kind of I think learned from experience that sometimes the polls can take longer for us to deliver everything, or there are backlog jobs that we want to prioritize. But just because it's not written there, it doesn't mean that we're not going to be doing them. It's just kind of going to be embedded into the standard work that team do throughout the rest of next year. Okay, it's been a few weeks since the Grand Exchange tax was introduced into the game. The wiki stated that 32 billion GP was sunk on December the 11th, or by December the 11th. Is there anything more official that we can share about how the GE tax is going? And also, will we ever be able to see the item sync / tax, tax statistics in game?
Well, it's been fascinating. It's been a really, really interesting sort of update to do, because God, does everybody in the team love seeing the data on this kind of stuff, right? How much money's been going? It's numbers you just are not used to, right? Firstly, I think generally we think it's gone pretty darn well. We've built confidence in it. In that, like today's update, we added a bunch of new items to the list, right? We gained that confidence from seeing it work initially and so on, and obviously assessing the data. So we're going to carry on, obviously paying attention to the numbers. We might make further tweaks in the future. But to give you some more hard facts, I mean, this is a few days old now, but like around after the first 6 days or so, in total, we had seen 180 billion gold taken in tax after 6 days. That's a big number. And shows the potential of what taxing, even at 1%, has in terms of helping inflation. That's a huge number. Now, 75% of that was sunk out of the game completely. And the rest went into, obviously, buying some of the items out of the game on those deletion lists. So it's like it's around 7,000 items were taken out of the game from those first 6 days. That's across that initial list, so your twisted bows, your arcane shields, etc. Now, there's obviously that breaks down into only X amount of T-bows, X amount of arcane spirit shields, and so on. So, generally the cheaper stuff that's more frequently traded, that stuff's been obviously deleted a lot more. So we've deleted a lot more tridents than we have twisted bows, and that's probably right. But we should be helping these items in terms of actually giving them a sync, probably for the first time ever. So down the line, obviously we're up for potentially even changing the tax rates. We could even change the tax rates on specific items if we so desired. But right now, we're obviously still paying attention to how it goes. We've just expanded the list, and we'll look at how that, how that changes things too. But it's, really, really happy with how it's gone. As for will we see the information in game, I don't know. Never say never with it, but I don't know if I have an answer to give you really at this point.
Okay. It's a pretty convoluted system, so I wouldn't be too surprised if the worst stats available in game, it's going to be a ways from now. But never say never. Kieran's new motto in life. There we go. All right, let's talk a little bit about the wilderness, and specifically why. I know we've touched on this a few times before, but just for clarity's sake, why have the wilderness changes taken so long to implement? I mean, obviously, we're seeing now the wilderness boss rework that was due this year has been pushed to next year, coming out, in basically the start of the second half of that. Is there anything that we can touch on?
I'll kind of go to two different topics, right? 2 reasons. One, resourcing, not prioritizing it as much as we maybe should have or could have. The operators team, who is largely dealing with quality of life polls, has been trying to do a bunch of these wilderness improvements on sort of alongside that. That's meant both quality of life polls and wilderness changes have happened pretty slowly, so it hasn't been given the attention it deserves. That is why we're trying to fix it next year with a full team dedicated to it, and that should be for the future, hopefully. The second point I want to make is it is harder, right? Adding a new boss, it's relatively darn straightforward. Adding a new skilling update, again, fairly straightforward. PvP, we end up in much more extensive design conversations to really come to a solution on different things. Let's look at the stuff we have just done, right? Adding a button to allow you to avoid being skull tricked. Changing the PJ timers and the rules around that. Those, in terms of the actual code changes, they're complicated, but not exactly extensive months of work. But to get to that point of doing them, we've had to do surveys. We really need to understand what the community wants, where the problems are in PvP. So, look, that's not to say that's an excuse. I'm trying to give a bit of clarity on kind of what goes into it, because at the end of the day, there's so much riding on it, right? If we get that stuff wrong, the PvP community will be pissed off, or players, and we're not going to necessarily help with the problem either. and that's where PvP is. It's in a kind of place where we need to tackle these longer running problems and then feed into obviously expanding with new content and things like that too. So look, progress is being made. It's been too slow. Next year, a lot more time going into PvP.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. We do have a few more kind of like PvP related questions. So if there are any kind of like unknowns at the moment, maybe they'll get answered with the next few. And the next one, kind of like talking on the wilderness updates themselves that were brought out. You touched on it with the anti-skull tricking change there, Kieren. Why does it feel like the wilderness updates are making the wilderness safer? If the goal is to increase activity, why don't you focus on increasing the profits from wilderness content?
Well, this stems from trying to understand why aren't more people trying PvP or getting into PvP. If you be very simplistic about it, you kind of got people who've played PvP a lot and people who just haven't. If you want to increase the amount of people playing PvP, we really need to understand why people aren't trying it out or getting into it. That's why we try to do surveys and try to understand the underlying reasons why people weren't fighting back in the wilderness or weren't willing to go into the wilderness or were getting pissed off when we, release stuff in the wilderness that's profitable and attractive and they feel kind of forced. So that's where the surveys came from. That gave us these insights into that people were scared of fighting back. People didn't want to get piled on by clans in singles, which meant instead of fighting, they would run away. Now, Predator versus Prey might be a legit part of PvP we also want, but these are the reasons we come to this. And now, the goal of this, obviously, is that you try and get more people to actually participate and feed that community and actually expand that community. This isn't the solution by itself. It obviously is just a very small part of a much bigger conversation around the features we're going to add, the other problems that we need to address, like even obviously the wilderness bosses is an already thing we've talked about, that they're generally a bit rubbish. So you do need those things in place. Profit or incentive in general is clearly something that is also needed. Like you've got to have a reason for doing it other than just merely, I'm going to have fun ruining someone's clue, or or I'm going to nick your 10 dragon bones because you're trying to use that wilderness out there, right? It's sure there might be some enjoyment out of it, but it's not enough to incentivize people to actually do PvP. And PvP extends beyond just the wilderness, so there's a huge range of different things we can try and tackle. And it kind of coming back to the points we've already been talking about, we're putting resource into it next year, and hopefully we can tackle the other sides of PvP as well. But I hope that kind of gives a little bit more insight into why these changes might be perceived almost negatively from certain PvP players, because it maybe is taking away a little bit from your power, but really what we're trying to do is get more people to be willing to actually get into PvP and join your community. Remains to be seen, obviously, is it going to work? That's something we need to assess and validate as we see what impact these changes have in the short term.
Yeah, I think that was a really good answer, especially towards the end where you kind of like nailed it on the head, is that the reality is that this is experimental, right? I know for a fact that a lot of people think the solution is to just chuck more profit in the wilderness, incentivize people to go in and make money, which can then provide targets for people to kill, and then those people that are killing those targets are then targets for other PKers to come and kill those, and it creates this whole ecosystem. I'm not going to sit here and deny that that doesn't exist, because it definitely does. But what I feel like we've seen in recent years especially is that when the fundamental issues exist within PvP for those that don't really want to engage in it but feel like they have to, then all that happens is that over time resentment starts to build up, and the hostility towards the side of community that they don't really want to engage in just increases. And kind of like we're in this position now where the people that feel quote unquote forced into PvP, even though it is a decision at the end of the day to go in, but ultimately, you're playing a game, you're paying for content, you want to be able to have access to it, you want to be able to enjoy it. Those people that then are going in, it's not so much that they mind that they're getting killed, because they are willing to accept the risk that they're going in, but it's the mechanics on how they're getting killed that they've had issues with. So our approach was essentially, as Kieren said, to try and solve those first. And the larger goal in mind really is build a strong foundation that does allow people to still go into PvP areas on terms that they understand, that they know certain things are or aren't going to happen. And once that's there, once people are a little bit more willing to participate, then we can really start focusing on bringing in the other updates that bring in extra profit, that are balanced around the fact that if we put something in singles, for example, that is going to be high profit, we know that we'll be looking at 1v1 encounters only. There are still issues with the PJ timer, for example, that prevent 1v1 fights from happening. That's something that we're going to continue to tweak based on feedback. But when we get there, we know that, you know, the people that are going in, they're aware of what's going to be happening when they're there. They're aware of what kind of reward they can expect whilst they're there as well. And they know to some degree that they'll be able to potentially fight back. And I guess hopefully over time, as we continue to build on that and add more of these updates where we have people that are willing to go in, the support then for more updates like that increases, and we can start moving away from the unpolled integrity, balancing, and mechanical changes to start considering really polling PvP content, wilderness content like we do anything else. We've seen that it's possible before with the Wilderness Revival 2, bringing in the Rev Caves, bringing in Major Arena 2 capes, and so on and so forth. Obviously, content in the past also passed for PvP polls. So it's definitely possible. But if we're just entirely alienating a large portion of the community, because the reality is the PvP community is small at the moment, and the majority of players aren't used to the old dynamic that the Wilderness used to provide or that PvP used to provide. A lot has changed since then. Players' mentalities have changed, and we kind of have to adjust if we want to continue to see healthy growth. And at least that's the way I see the initiatives are. Build a strong foundation that then we can then start considering bringing in better, more profitable updates, because the alternative is if we don't fix the problems that the majority of players experience, they're going to go in, you'll see an uplift for the next 2-3 weeks, maybe 2-3 months, and then we start to see all the negativity, all the bad feedback, all of the issues that we then have to resolve or even consider removing pieces of content. And I feel like the best solution is one where we can have the content and avoid that from happening, and then continue to provide more of it too. Hopefully I didn't waffle too much there, and I got my point across. So I think this is one to last. We've got 2 more PvP questions here. You've said that you will only bring Bounty Hunter back if you could make sure it was non-abusable. PvP will always be abused in some way, and it's up to you to care about the game mode enough to monitor it. Why is the solution not to just add more anti-cheating resources?
Yeah, so obviously the PvP content is always particularly susceptible to abuse. And we know that if we bring Bounty Hunter back, it would need to have modifications, I guess, to take that into account. And we'd also be looking at generally more robust kind of anti-cheating resources, generally for the game as a whole, but that would be part of this. I think the point that Kieren made earlier was like particularly pertinent around the fact that PvP content is always like super complex to design, because you're always thinking of all of the fringe issues and the ways it can be abused and all these kind of things. And that's what makes it extremely time consuming to kind of work on, and then maintenance obviously is difficult as well. So yes, we are fully aware of that, and we are generally wanting to improve anti-cheating within the game as a whole.
Great, thank you, Markos. I guess just to add to that as well, if you aren't already aware, if you haven't read the Gazette, there is a section in there that just talk about Bounty Hunter potentially coming back. We are hopeful that we'll be able to see it return in the second half of 2022. At least that's what we're going to be aiming towards. But that does entirely depend on the whole design. It could be that actually Bounty Hunter changes massively compared to what it was before, but some form of Bounty Hunter-esque content, at least what that platform provided, will hopefully be coming to the second half of 2022. And then last PvP question is, do we have a longer term plan for PvP? Very open-ended.
You kind of
covered it, I think, in a lot
pretty
of
well just a minute ago. So I guess to reiterate what kind of you were saying, I think the first thing is we realise that there's longer term issues of things we have to fix and like underlying things we need to kind of address, and like content that we promised a while ago that we never got around to doing that we need to do. And we kind of see that as the starting point essentially. So kind of getting that stuff sorted out, and then from there we'll be working with the community to generate like a good kind of like strong long-term plan for PvP as a whole.
Awesome. Thank you, Markos. I mean, I'm already excited. I'm hopeful that we can, in time, if we can, prove that our word is true, win back some of the support from the honestly very faithful and committed PvP community that have stuck around for so long, despite the issues that they've faced. In all honesty, I mean, when I saw PvP Arena going into the roadmap, I was really excited myself. I'm really looking forward to that, and I think that'll be my way of getting into PvP now, after someone who's not done it since, well, I was about 13. So cool. All right. So this next question's a bit of a big one. I apologize. The past year, nothing significant has failed a poll. Are you guys happy with the current state of the polling system? It feels as though the stuff being polled is often redundant and can cause a lot of voting fatigue. Do you agree with the way that content is currently polled, and are you planning on changing anything in this area for next year?
So we've had some discussions around ways we think we could kind of try and improve or iterate the current polling system. Generally, obviously, we really believe in the polling system being an important part of the game and a key part of what kind of old school is. I think most of the issues that have been raised when we've kind of discussed this with the wider team is around the ability to effectively service kind of smaller subsets of the community. It's kind of like you were talking about a few minutes ago. So it's like how things for PvP in particular kind of get passed. So we know that there's some improvements we can make there. And the other thing is also probably to reiterate, if lots of things are passing polling, it's also an indication that hopefully that we're also delivering content that people really want. So it's kind of things that we're kind of well aligned with the community as, and we have a good understanding of what you'd actually like to see in the game. So when we go to the polling, it's actually hopefully fairly straightforward process where it kind of goes through, and we don't have to make many changes based on kind of feedback before it passes or something.
Yeah, I would definitely say that a lot of things passing doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. If anything, it probably is quite good, because you say we're either hitting the nail on the head, or people are just that thirsty for content that they're willing to just say yes to anything. And that doesn't always happen. We can clearly see when there are pieces of content that people don't like, just off voting habits, for sure. If you don't mind, I'm going to just quickly throw something out there, because I want to kind of gauge the reaction of the chat in terms of how I see an alternate approach to polling. Because I definitely don't want to remove the polling system. I love it for what it is, and I think it's fantastic for old school. But I do think that there are some benefits that we could get as a team, as well as the players. So imagine the next time you see a roadmap, and obviously not this one, but you see all the big pieces of content on there. And the very first kind of blog that you get of the year is a bunch of questions that essentially go to this level of detail. You see a very rough design for a new raid, and the first question is, do you want this new raid to be added to the game? Knowing that further blogs will be put out in the future to then talk about the rewards. Because that then means that if that was to pass, then the dev team know straight away that they can start working on that raid without it being potentially wasted time. And then later on in the process, when we're ready to start surfacing rewards to you, we come out with a set of rewards. And the poll is structured in a way that we can really identify what you do or don't like about the rewards. So we bring out a new weapon, for example. And the question is, if this weapon was polled as it was described in the blog, would you vote yes? And if you voted yes on that, then great. And if you voted no, it would then ask why. And it would have questions such as, I think the reward is too powerful. I think the reward is too underwhelming. I don't like the reward at all. Maybe you just don't care for that particular item. To really try and get a little bit more quantifiable feedback and reasons as to why you may or may not like something. I think at the moment our process can be a little bit janky. It requires a lot on getting feedback from comments and such, and going through to different community members. Cool. It seems like there's a fair few yeses, and that sounds good. So, okay, doesn't mean that there's going to be change, but yeah, as Markos said, highlighting some improvements that we could make. Okay. The next question is in regards to servers and basically what is being done to solve the issues of lag spikes that are currently occurring in game, especially when you consider the 2K plus total level worlds.
I do know a little bit about this. I know that much earlier, 2021, some work was done to put more sort of tracking on kind of different elements of, you know, what load is on the server and what's contributing to that load, essentially. So that's been drilled down a lot more deeply now. It needs analyzing further to probably understand like what's actually happening here, and we have some suspicions about what's going on. We are looking to sort of prioritize more time to be spent on working this out and getting to the bottom of it, because, you know, it's been happening and going on for quite a while on these worlds. And Mark, maybe you could talk about like what we're doing going forward with servers.
Yeah, we do have obviously plans to kind of upgrade the servers over time, which is something we're hoping to do. Hopefully give you an update on kind of like reasonably soon. So there are plans to invest in the infrastructure to generally improve player experience around these things.
Great. I know that probably seemed a little bit ominous there from you, Markos, but I know what you're talking about, and I know that it's a little bit too early to completely concrete in the plans. But yeah, there's very likely going to be comms coming out in the next couple of weeks at least that will talk about something that will be happening.
Yeah. Suffice to say, most of our servers are on pretty old tech. We could do with upgrading stuff.
Yeah. Okay, next question is in regards to Partner Slayer. Are we planning on bringing back any iteration of Partner Slayer? It's not in the roadmap, but it's something that a lot of players want to see.
So, right, I don't want to rant and go on sort of too long.
Here he goes.
Yeah, but I think Group Iron Man has been something that's particularly highlighted, like how valuable social play is in old school, right? The idea of being able to play with other people and do things together. And you see that not just in Group Iron Man, but in bits of content as well, like whether it's, you know, Winter Todd or Tempros or raids. When you get to do stuff with other players, there's a different element you kind of get from that. Even in a light touch thing like Tempros, where you kind of just around other people. In fact, you know, stuff like Partner Slayer has been requested specifically for Group Iron Man, even like the fact that Group Iron Man could collectively do a Slayer task. But obviously, this is something that was originally in the game. Partner Slayer was available, and it was for quite a while. It's quite an old feature where you were able to sort of do Slayer with a partner, and, you know, 2-player up any Slayer task. Now, to give context for anyone who doesn't know, we temporarily removed it from the game and disabled it because it was able to be abused to possibly get fast XP tasks. More commonly, you could get Smoke Devils basically very, very easily and get a lot of Slayer XP very quickly, which we had to take the decision to say, we don't know an easy solution to this, let's take out the game. It's been a while now, hence why people are also asking, is it ever going to come back? What's happening with it? Reality is, we would like to. We haven't had the chance to spend such time on it. You know, we've had priorities in other places, be it clans, Group Iron Man, other projects, and so on. And so there's still a design challenge to solve. 2 things: make sure it's not abusable, and making sure it has a use beyond the kind of just, I'm going to have fun with a friend. I'm conscious that we don't want it to be the best XP, because then single players feel a little bit more forced to have to do it with a partner. That's awkward. But what's the point in it, right? That's what we're going to also try and work out beyond just the social element and give it a use case. But yeah, unfortunately, it hasn't been the priority. We've had other things to work on, other projects. We want to make sure we're releasing monthly stuff that's weighty and punchy, like we've been talking about. So there's no plans immediately. Down the line, we are keen on it. There's conversations that have been happening around it. Perhaps in the short term, we should probably remove the partner option from the gem, so it's not like in your face all the time. But yeah, not much else to add.
Okay, great, thank you. Wow, we are absolutely flying through the questions. There's a few more to go through. The roadmap. It currently includes new player experience in it. Can you expand on this? Basically, if you can let us know what is being done to attract new players to the game.
Yeah, so this covers a few different things. Like fundamentally, we obviously you want to reduce the kind of friction for when new people come to the game. Obviously, Old School is quite an established game now. It's got a lot of content, and it's not necessarily hugely accessible for new players. It's pretty fair description. So we want to be able to improve kind of like the very beginning of the game for players. So making sure there's less points of friction and there's more obvious kind of what's going on. It could even be like super basic things like making sure we get them onto a better starting server for them to kind of like first play the game and so on. So new player experience is kind of like a catch-all for that. So it's a variety of improvements to the start of the game. And then we're also looking at a few other bits, such as like how you get from the website to installing the clients and those kind of things. So it's kind of like new players, like how they first make contact with the game. And then some of the other bits we're also kind of quite interested in are like what do people see almost when they return to the game as well. So they're kind of like not new players, but maybe they've not played the game for 6 months or a year. So like what do they see? What's their route into the game? We want to make sure all those things are a bit better as well.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. Ooh, this is a big one. I think I'm probably gonna have to take this one too. I'll get myself ready. There are several streamers who are using cheat clients and nothing happens to their accounts. Why is this? So my answer to this is that there are certain plugins that are available that I guess with the way that the landscape has changed within the community and just generally, we probably need to update our third-party client guidelines since they've been posted. It was quite a while back now. That being said, if there are any clear-cut cases of abuse, obviously people using clients in a bad way to actually full-on cheat, please send them to tipoff@jagex.com. It does get reviewed, but the caveat on that is try and provide as much information as possible. So to give you an example, if you just simply sent an email with an RSN and an angry message to say that they were cheating, it's probably not going to be, well, no, it's definitely not going to be anywhere near as useful as if you were going to give actual evidence like screenshots or a video, maybe a clip from a stream or a timestamp from a YouTube video with a clearer description of what they were doing and when. We have and continue to take action against people that are abusing third-party clients for nefarious means, especially people that are trying to use them in PvP situations with the auto switches and stuff. So yeah, tipoff@jagex.com is the best place for that. Otherwise, you can look to report them directly to one of us really that are available on Twitter. You can @ me, for example, and I'll try and forward what I can. But that email is definitely the best because I do often miss notifications. So yeah, but we will be working. I know, Kieren, we've spoke somewhat briefly. I know we need to expand on that conversation a little bit, but about getting the third-party client guidelines updated. So that's something that we do hope to have done relatively soon, at least. I'm not sure if there's anything else that you wanted to add at all.
No, but updating those for where we are at today to provide clarity on what's allowed and what's not, I think will help and sort of put another level of emphasis on what we're doing with clients at the minute.
Mm-hmm. Perfect, thank you. I'm seeing some people in chat asking about like other areas, maybe bots that are farming certain places. You can also send evidence to tipoff@jagex.com for those kind of issues too. However, it is always best to, if you can, report it in-game using the appropriate report option that's available to you. And if you want to be doubly sure and help us out, then do both. But the first port of call should always be to report it in-game if you expect or suspect any abuse is happening. And then after that, you can use the email to essentially send additional evidence that we may not otherwise be able to get a hold of if it was an in-game report. Okay, last question that I have here at least, and maybe we can grab some through from the chat to fill the last bit of time. Are there ever going to be plans to add a new skill in-game? Big one.
Yeah, so yes, I guess is the simple answer. So obviously we've tried to, we've worked with the community a bit on some new skill ideas before. Like none of them have passed polling previously. So, but we do still have an ambition to do that in the future. And the challenge really is kind of finding, I guess, what the right skill is that the community feels will really add something to the game. So it's something the team will be looking at in kind of the future and be kind of be reaching out to the community, kind of start kind of conversations around that. And the other thing is also, from when we've looked at new skills before, it's the part of the challenge is obviously because they're innately complex. It's like, how do you clearly explain what you ought to do with it so people will understand it and kind of get an idea of how it's going to work and so on. So we need to find a good way of being able to explain and demonstrate kind of what our ideas are as well, so that people kind of like will clearly understand what we're trying to get across and kind of give feedback, and we kind of work from there as well.
Hell yeah. I talked a little bit about skills a few weeks ago as well, and certainly it's something I think a lot of people on the team would love to do. It's sort of the one update where we can add a lot of depth in new systems and new layers on the game, where you can't really necessarily do that as well in a new boss or a new quest or new skilling feature and so on, right? It's a real chance to expand what old school is and sort of give you a different vibe, right? When you play the game and with that skill, something that's fresh and feels completely different to anything else you've played before. So there's a huge, I mean, you can see them in the chat. There's a huge array of ideas for potential skills. A lot of people shouting for things that are in RuneScape, or completely new ideas as well. And, you know, that's obviously a massive question in terms of, if we're going to do a skill, what skill would we do? And I think, you know, when we put time onto it in the future, I think the first port of call will be, let's just prototype. Let's play around with new ideas and see what really works. And probably involve the players from the get-go, rather than the approach we took in the past, which is Jagex goes into its, you know, its HQ, hides beneath the surface for several months until it's got a design ready to share. I think we need to kind of let the player base, or at least somehow into that process earlier in that chain, and then I think we can, you know, we'll do a better job than we have done when we've pitched warding and so on.
Great, thank you both. I appreciate that. That was the last of the questions that we'd got put together ready for the stream, at least. So let's move on to some questions that we've had come through from chat, at least. I said at least twice in the same sentence. Wow. First question from the chat is, what about the Dead Man Reborn rerun? Any progress updates that we can give on that? It's been quite a while.
Do you want me to take that, Kieran?
Yeah, if you can take it.
So I guess I've got to catch up with some of the people doing the work on it tomorrow, and then after then I'll have an idea about more exact dates for when we'll be able to do it. So we're still doing some work on the server side to kind of help with things, and I'm just I need to get an update on when that work's likely to be done, which will be the main thing that will we need to be able to do the rerun. I hope to have more information tomorrow, so it'll probably be in January we'll be able to update everyone.
Fantastic, thank you for that. I believe the last kind of update that we left players with was that we would be looking for some time in January at least. I imagine the reality of that is that if it's going to be in January for a rerun, it'll be late January, and if not, it'll probably then fall into future months at least. But we'll. I just said at least again. I'm going to keep thinking that now the whole time.
I'll have a bit more information tomorrow. I think it might be more likely to be February than January, the rerun, if I'm totally honest. But yeah, I will have some more information soon.
Thank you. To be honest, I think it makes sense anyway with people wanting to get, you know, stuck into Nexon leagues. Those that are in the Dead Man Reborn would probably want to spend time on that than come in for the weekend for their finals at least. I just did it again. Oh my god. All right, no more at least. If I say that one more time, then I'm going to leave. The next question coming in is, what are your plans for the revival of the multi-scene in the long term? Since the Revenant changes, this community has decreased a lot. I don't mind picking this one up because I'll just give an honest answer. Currently, as far as I'm aware, we don't have any plans. That may change depending on how the Wilderness boss rework ends up, but because the designs aren't finalized, I don't want to say that most definitely will be multi or won't be multi. In an ideal situation, the way that I would see it at least is that multi is very different to the rest of the Wilderness in that there's a very specific, you know, cohort of players that are interested in multi-combat, and it's probably even smaller. Outside of, you know, the large clans that get involved in there in terms of general interest in the wider community, much smaller than other areas of PvP. But yeah, ideal, I would probably say something along the lines of a a boss that roams around the multi area within the wilderness that clans need to fight over for control of, and then are rewarded for doing so. Either that, or I know that content creators themselves have put forward ideas for a general expansion of the wilderness, making it even deeper, which would introduce some new multi-zones. We really need to get a handle on what we are going to do with our longer term plans for the whole of the PvP community once we've finished working on the foundations, at least. So yeah, at the moment, no concrete plans, but definitely on our radar, as well as all the other areas of PvP and those communities that get involved in it. Okay, we have a question that asks, when will we get more info on the mechanics of Leagues 3? I'm going to imagine on release.
You might well know the answer more than me. But on release, certainly you'll find out everything. Do you have any idea on the timelines for like the trailers and all of that cool stuff, Ayiza?
I do, but I don't know if I'm able to say when it's coming out. Yeah, I don't want to ruin marketing surprises. I think this time it's going to be a little bit different though. Obviously, last league we did go into a lot of detail about it before the league came out, and we are intentionally being a little bit less informative this time round. So it may well be that the full mechanics of the league you don't find out until the day of the league releasing. You know roughly what this league is about in terms of the fragment system, in terms of the unlocking of content. So those are the kind of like main things to go off. And yeah, I'm sure there are people that want to theorycraft on that. But at the moment, I myself know that from community who would normally be responsible for putting out this kind of information, we don't have anything planned to come out between now and when the league releases. It doesn't mean that we won't, though. It could be that we put out like a little refresher a week or so before. It's just that plans for that aren't finalized or haven't been put together yet, but it may well be that we do. I kind of like the element of surprise, but yeah, I know there's a lot of people that like to theorycraft and be as efficient as possible, so we'll see.
If anything, maybe there's value in sort of bringing the information that does exist in the sort of public,
back to light,
in the public domain.
Exactly, yeah. So just like that refresh,
in one place, sort of thing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Okay. Then we have. I'm going to ask this, but I think I know the answer because we kind of covered it already when you talked about anti-cheating, Markos. But the question is, what's being done to tackle the constant stream of bots at Last Man Standing? They're in every single game right now, and it's almost impossible to ignore them.
Okay, so we do have some ideas on how to tackle that. And I think there's an action against me to actually chase that up in the new year. So that is supposed to be something I'm following up.
Okay. Well, you know what? I'm happy at least to hear that it's on the radar to be.
It's
been
been
looked into
brought by
further.
a couple of people we have in the team.
Yeah, I know that the anti-cheating team themselves they do actively ban the bots that are in LMS. We've released stats about it before in the past. Honestly, from the information they provide us, essentially what happens is the bots get banned and then they're instantly recreated in the same amount of numbers and back into it again. So every day those bots are taken out. Maybe there's some instances where you've seen the same bot more than once, but for the most part, they are getting banned. It's just they're really easy to recreate because there are no entry requirements for LMS past the very small kind of like playtime and few requirements that you need to get. So yeah, they are constantly looking at ways to improve. Hopefully, Markos's meeting will help with that too. And then I guess the last question that we can finish up with is, will there ever be a world dedicated to Finnish and Swedish players and such? I think it should just be like more dedicated worlds in general, because I know we've got quite a growing community over in Asian countries, for example, and a lot of those areas suffer with ping when having to play on either the New Zealand servers or US.
Well, I think, first protocol, there's maybe a cheaper thing you can do in terms of if you want the community to be able to come together. Obviously, right now we don't have a server in Finland or Sweden. or Scandinavia, right? We have servers in Germany for Europe. But in theory, you could at least flag a world as Finland or Sweden, as much as the server might not be there and you might not get better pings. You could bring the community together. If there's value in doing that, that's probably pretty darn easy to do. But in terms of adding actual server support in that region, or indeed in other regions, like Ayiza says, like South America or Asia and so on, that's a bigger conversation where we will need to go away and ultimately assess like the costs in setting up a server and what value we're going to get for that, like how many players are actually in that region, is it worth it, and so on. And potentially that stuff's easier once we are upgrading our server tech and so on. But there's no current plans, and that's a bigger conversation that we would need to have with like our product team, with our sort of server teams and so on.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Well, that was the last question that we have time for. So I'm going to go back over the announcements, and then maybe we can wrap the stream up with that fantastic next trailer. So first of all, ! Game update. It's Christmas in Gillinor. This year's Christmas... I've got to say it again, haven't I? This year's Christmas event is based in Fa-la-la-la-la-la-la-la-door. So definitely go check it out. This week's game update is the last of the year, and what a way to end it. ! Game update. Sani, stop laughing. ! Gazette. The December Gillinor Gazette is out. We've got a roadmap for the first half of 2022. We've discussed that in a bit more detail today, so if you're just tuning in, go check the VOD out. You can just check our past broadcasts or wait until it's uploaded on YouTube and timestamp for your convenience. In that Gazette, we also have more information on frequent topics, on the things you care about. So take a read and let us know your feedback. ! Gazette. We'd also like to thank everyone who took the time to vote in the Golden Gnome so far, and to remind you that the polls close tonight at midnight GMT. The event starts tomorrow right here on our Twitch channel at 5 p.m. GMT. ! Golden Gnomes for that one. And then last but not least, ! Next trailer. The 5th General is releasing on January the 5th. Want something more to stew on? Check out this awesome trailer in the meantime, and before that plays, we'll say our goodbyes now. Anything that you want to say to close up the stream? Kieren, Markos?
Let's have a great holiday period, everyone.
Awesome. I'll echo that statement too. Have a wonderful time off. Enjoy your holidays, this festive season, however you may be celebrating. And if you're not, then hopefully your days go by nice and fast into the new year. Have a great new year all. We'll see you in January. You'll see me tomorrow at the Golden Gnomes when you all tune in, right? Bye.
The prophecy foretold of an ancient warrior locked in a prison deep beneath Trollheim. A force so powerful, so malevolent, 4 opposing armies united to contain its evil. They called her the 5th General. It's said she hoards artifacts of tremendous power, and that an enchanted seal is all that separates the brave from her wrath. You don't believe the story's true, do you?